Welcome back in, everybody, to episode 2 of the Draft Geeks podcast. Got a good one for you today. The Senior Bowl just wrapped up in Mobile, Alabama, so talk some Senior Bowl risers and fallers and let you guys, of course, subscribe, like, follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever you guys listen to us on. We appreciate all the support. So without further ado, the Draft Geeks podcast starts right now.
Welcome into episode 2 of the Draft Geeks podcast, everybody. I'm Max Showstack alongside Jace Campbell. Today, we got an exciting episode for y'all. We're bringing you our risers and fallers from the Senior Bowl that just wrapped up in Mobile, Alabama. We got 5 guys that we really agree upon, so we're going to really hammer those home, why those guys are the biggest winners of the Senior Bowl. We also have 3 individual guys that we're bringing you and some fallers, not necessarily losers because stocks go up and stocks go down, but some guys that definitely didn't capitalize on the opportunity, in our opinion. Jace, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. I loved watching the Senior Bowl, the practices. Some guys, improved their stock. Some guys kind of, did okay. Maybe you expect a little bit more. And then there's obviously some clear losers who probably would have been better not going to Mobile. Not that anyone would ever turn it down, but maybe they're sitting there like, okay, that was not the best week for me. But no, lots to talk about. Excited to get into it. Excited to talk about some of these guys because there was a lot of talent there. And we know, I think the Senior Bowl every year just gets more and more loaded with talent, and more people are drafting Senior Bowl prospects in the top 100, top 50. You continuously see guys from here turn into NFL superstars. So really, really good bowl game. I love how it's, the draft starts in Mobile because it really does. This was a great week.
Yeah, it was a great week. And I guess I'll kick it off right here. Our first guy so we sent, full disclosure, we sent our list back and forth. Usually we're not going to have much preparation between the two of us, but we wanted to make sure we didn't come in with the exact same list. So we got some guys we both had on our lists, and then we got 3 extra guys. So we'll get started with one of the guys that we both had, and that's Elijah Arroyo, the Miami tight end. He came into the week, maybe tight end 4, maybe tight end 5, tight end 6 for some people. And I really do think he left, and we'll touch on it a little deeper later on. He's going to be tight end 3 for a lot of people after this week. I think he's a major downfield threat. And, we saw it for the first time with Cam Ward this season. He really had a breakout season, and that continued on into Mobile. And he wasn't, the tight end 1 and tight end 2 in this class, or Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. And those guys were the main event in their receiving core this season. Elijah Arroyo, that wasn't the case. He had Xavier Restrepo alongside him, so he wasn't getting all of the attention, all of the targets. But Elijah Arroyo really showcased his ability to stretch the field. His measurables were good. And I think Elijah Arroyo is somebody that absolutely boosted his stock this week.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at his measurables. I'll read it off real quick as this is coming up. I should have had this pulled up a little bit sooner, but he officially came in at 6'4.5", 251 pounds, a little bit bigger than a guy like Harold Fannin, who we'll talk about here later. I still like Harold Fannin. I'm not saying that I don't like him, but I think Elijah Arroyo was the clear winner of this tight end group, continuously winning one-on-ones, whether it was against safeties or against linebackers. Was a tough guard. He pretty much ran anything in the route tree. And this is a guy who, I actually didn't know this until I was reading up on some stats. He led college football in yards per reception at the tight end position and yards after the catch, or what was it, yards after contact, something like that. Like, you expected to be Harold Fannin, right? But Elijah Arroyo had this great season. It was just overlooked by a generational season by Harold Fannin. So I thought he did a ton to boost his stock. I think he's probably looking at a late day 2 pick, maybe even a middle day 2 pick, right at the end of the second, maybe early third. But this is a super deep tight end class, and he just adds to it. And yeah, I think that looking at him, he's going to be a little bit of a bigger tight end down the field. Harold Fannin Jr. can, obviously stretch the field with his speed and stuff, but you're now adding, a inch and a half of height in Elijah Arroyo compared to Harold Fannin, who is 6'3" and 1/8. So I loved what Elijah Arroyo did. And I agree with you. I would probably put him as my tight end 4 right now. I don't know if I'd have him past Fannin. He might be close, but it's obviously Warren, Loveland, Fannin, and probably Arroyo right now as my top 4 tight ends.
Yeah, and there's going to be some teams that Fannin just doesn't fit for. So that's what I'm kind of referencing when I say Arroyo is going to be some people's tight end threes. And for those not familiar, Harold Fannin out of Bowling Green had an absolutely remarkable season, but he did it primarily out of the slot, some snaps out wide, some snaps at H-back, and then some snaps in line, of course. But he's not going to be that traditional tight end that's going to line up in line at the next level. So think Jonnu Smith, Miami Dolphins this year. Think Isaiah Likely, Baltimore Ravens, where they're really acting as a member of the wide receiver core. And so I think Elijah Arroyo gives you perhaps a more complete prospect that some teams will favor over Fannin just because their offense doesn't include a role for a player like Fannin. So tight end 3, tight end 4 for some teams. And if those tight ends, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, go in the top 20, Elijah Arroyo could, I don't want to say get overdrafted, but could get drafted higher than we expect just because of need.
Do you think Elijah Arroyo is a better prospect coming out than what Ben Sinnott was last year?
Ooh, I mean, those are really different players because Ben Sinnott's kind of did everything for you,
Yeah.
did more of the nitty gritty stuff than I think Elijah Arroyo does. But I do, just because I think that's my kind of guy, Elijah Arroyo, somebody that, like, obviously the tight end's got to do the dirty work. And, maybe this is talking a little bit differently than we'll be able to in 3 years, because I think Sinnott is going to have kind of a breakout year 2 in Washington this year. But I think the highest highs for Arroyo are really good. And I think he could be a really special player in the NFL. Not talked about enough, in my opinion. I actually see a possibility where he is the last pick of the first round. If the Chiefs really want to look into that, post Kelsey future, I think Elijah Arroyo could be a really good prospect for them. So I think his range kind of starts at 32 and then obviously it goes down to 75 because he's a tight end. So only a handful of teams are willing to use a top 75 pick on a tight end. But I think Elijah Arroyo, better than Ben Sinnott. I think he would have been my tight end 1 last year also, because I wasn't that big of a fan of Jatavion Sanders.
I just brought that up because Ben Sinnott was
tight end 2, Brock Bowers. Hello.
Yeah. No, dude, Brock Bowers isn't that good. He's not that good.
Overrated.
No, I brought that up because Ben Sinnott was the 53rd overall pick, right? And I liked Sinnott. Like, I'm not saying I didn't. I agree with you. They're a little bit different of a tight end, but I would have probably drafted Arroyo over Sinnott last year. So, yeah, like you say, his range probably starts at 32 if Kansas City really does want to do that. So, if he were to get drafted over Harold Fannin, I don't think it would be a shock. I think you could justify taking him over Harold Fannin. Would I take him over Loveland or Warren? Probably not. But you can justify him after what he did at the Senior Bowl and his season at Miami. You can justify him getting taken before as the tight end 3 before, Harold Fannin. So, yeah, he was impressive. He might have been, in my opinion, the guy that gained the most, right? He was on your radar. You probably had him, like you mentioned, tight end 6, tight end 5 in that range. Yep. But, man, he outperformed Harold Fannin, and he was kind of the eye-opener at that position. You're like, whoa, okay, this guy got some juice to him, and yeah, he's going to be a special player in the NFL, I think.
Yeah, so our next guy is Azareye'h Thomas, cornerback out of Florida State. And he had an incredible statistical season. And it just wasn't talked about because Florida State won, 2 games this season?
The biggest fall off in college football.
I mean, seriously. So Thomas, he's sticky coverage all week long and all season long. And he's only 20 years old. So this guy came, and normally 2 years ago, wouldn't have been allowed at the Senior Bowl because Senior Bowl was just for seniors. This is kind of what you get with the addition of juniors, redshirt juniors, all that kind of thing. So Azareye'h Thomas, really, really impressive week. Came in as kind of an unknown at the back end of this cornerback class, because once you clear the Will Johnson, obviously Travis Hunter, Jahdae Barron tier, there's kind of an unknown, a lot of guys with injuries, and then some unknown guys like a Trey Amos or an Azareye'h Thomas, where you saw some good things, you wanted to see more, and Thomas showed up, and he was everywhere, man. He was locked down. I think he was, I'm going to go over another corner in a little bit, but he was the best corner there. And in an event that the practices are really tailored towards wide receivers, because there's no pass rush. And so these receivers can take 25 years to get off the line of scrimmage and run as many TikTok routes as they want to. Azareye'h Thomas was, he was completely locked in. He was all there. I saw an interview where he was, talking about how he had watched film on every single one of the guys there. He knew who to press, who not to press. Guy did his homework, and it really showed. And he's going to potentially work his way into the first round. I think he's going to be a top 64 pick, though.
No, yeah, this is like you mentioned, it's always fun, and I think that there were a lot more big name wide receivers going to the Senior Bowl. So seeing a guy like Thomas who came out and dominated one-on-ones, he didn't even need to play Saturday. He felt like he had done his stock. He obviously got word. His agent told him like, "Hey, like, no need to play Saturday. You've done enough." And I agree with that. He was the best corner there. He was locking down guys left and right. I think you look at the back half of the first round and you say, hey, there's some cornerback needy teams there. Buffalo comes to mind. Buffalo should jump all over this. He measured really well too. He's a bigger, longer corner, 6'1.5". He came in with 10 and an eighth inch hands, which is actually really big hands. And then he had a 6'5" wingspan. Like, he's big, he's long. He showed, like you mentioned, okay, yeah, maybe some teams are not going to be attracted to him as much because they don't play as much man coverage, but he showed he can play man coverage. He can press at the line of scrimmage. He can run downfield with those receivers, open up his hips. So again, another guy in my mind that I wasn't necessarily watching closely, right? He wasn't the big name coming out. You said it. Florida State, 2 wins all year. You know, they should have been in the college football playoff after an undefeated season 2 years ago, fall off and, you know, win 2 games. So a lot of people didn't pay attention to this team. So for me, him coming in and him performing is like, okay, yeah, there still was a lot of talent on that Florida State team. A lot of people just, like I said, it was the biggest fall off in college football history, probably. So a lot of people probably regarded a lot of their prospects. But no, I think that cornerback needy teams in the back half of the first round are going to fall in love with this guy and want to take him length alone. What he showed, his ability to do in press coverage, it was really impressive.
Yeah, and the only time I watched Florida State this year was when I was watching Cam Ward, Xavier Restrepo, and Elijah Arroyo and Damian Martinez. Those guys play in that game. And then as I'm kind of filling up my draft board, I'm like, okay, you know, FSU's got a corner generating some buzz. He's got a Senior Bowl invite. And I turned on the one of the Restrepo games against FSU, and I go, oh my God, a 8 can play. And then, you know, I'm like, oh, that's the guy with the Senior Bowl invite who's 20. And it all comes together. And then boom, he has an incredible week. Before the week, I made a post about the guys that have the most to gain at the Senior Bowl. He was right in the middle of that list, and boy, did he take advantage.
For sure. And where you're looking at the Buffalo Bills, I use them again. The Baltimore Ravens, the Ravens got mocked to take him in one of the drafts just recently by one of the experts. In a league that is so wide receiver offensive friendly, if you can find a guy who can lock down half the field, and I'm saying this because I'm a Patriots fan, but right, Christian Gonzalez has been a breath of fresh air, because if you can take a guy who can lock down half the field, it makes it a lot easier how to game plan for the other half. Hey, you can play man on this side, zone on that side. You can put this guy on the best receiver on the opposite side of the field, take him away. It opens up a ton for a defensive coordinator. So I think if he continues to develop like that, like you mentioned, 20 years old, I don't even think we've seen this dude's best football ahead of him.
No, I don't either.
He could be a freak. And in a couple years, you're like, holy crap, how was he a late first round pick? He had all the talent and all the measurables to be a top 15 pick. So at 20 years old, seeing what he did out there against some of the best receivers and, you know, guys that are going to be good NFL guys, it was really impressive. And yeah, add on the 20 years old part of it. You're like, hey, this guy has a lot of good football ahead of him.
Yeah. So our third guy, Senior Bowl MVP, probably the best story out there all week long. The TCU wide receiver, Jack Besh. For those of you who don't know, his older brother, Tiger, tragically passed away in the terrible incident in Bourbon Street. And Jack Besh put on an absolute show all week long in practices, always open, always caught the ball. The game rolls around. I think he had 6 catches for 61 yards and the game-winning touchdown. Jack Besh is always going to be open. He is always going to have the savviest routes. He's going to block, and he only had 1 drop this year. He's going to catch the ball, which was a breath of fresh air for Josh Hoover and the TCU offense, because you have Savion Williams with 8 drops right across from him this year. So Jack Besh is a reliable target, one of my favorite wide receivers in the class. I think he worked his way into the second round, which is where I had him graded out when I did my wide receiver preview earlier this year. But Jack Besh is a really talented player, and I think he got to where he should be, which, I mean, it's some of these risers weren't really on my radar. Jack Besh was somebody that was fully on my radar, thought was really underrated coming into this process. Now I think he's been properly rated, and I'm really happy for him.
No, I mean, the best story by far. Obviously, what happened to his brother, tragic. but how he performed was the other, part of it too. You coming out, talk about making money for yourself. That's exactly what he did. He's getting a lot of Puka Nacua comps. That's really, really lofty comps. Okay. But he's bigger, he's thicker. His knock is going to be, hey, he's probably going to run in the 4.5s, maybe the 4.6s for his 40. He's not going to be super fast, but everyone said like his play speed is way faster than that. And that's what we're seeing with Puka Nacua. Yep. Guys like Jack Besh just know how to play the receiver position. They know how to get open. He was a tight end coming out of high school. They recruit him as a tight end. He's a bigger bodied guy. He's thicker lower halves. He makes those contested catches. He had a 65% contested catch rate this year. And like you said, he had a 1.6% drop rate. That was unheard of at TCU. They had a ton of guys who were having concentration drops left and right. So to get a guy who, okay, yeah, he doesn't wow you physically. He's not going to run a 4.2, a 4.3 40, but he does everything right. He does what you need to do to win football games. I think he can be a high-end level guy for a team if they use him right. He's not going to be Justin Jefferson. He's not going to be Jamar Chase, but he can come in and be a top 15 receiver in the NFL, top 20 receiver in the NFL if everything goes right. Right. He knows how to use leverage. He knows how to get open. He knows how to play with that speed that some people just, hey, Tyquan Thornton. I'm trying to think of guys who have had the speed in the NFL draft. Who cares, man? They don't get open. They don't get open in the NFL. Okay, 4.2, 4.3 speed is great. But if you can't get open down the field or you can't separate at the line of scrimmage, who cares, man? It don't matter. You're playing against the best athletes in the world on the other side of the ball at cornerback position. So, yeah, that was one thing. I will say a little bit of a concern for him, and I'm sure you have this on, is his hand size, okay? For a guy that measured in officially at 6'1.25" to have 8 7/8 inch hands is a little bit concerning. I actually threw this out. It's a stat that I read the other day. There's only been one. It's happened twice, but there's only been one top 12 receiver in an NFL season since 2000 that have had under 9-inch hands, and that was T.Y. Hill, and he did it twice. He did it 2 times. So really only one receiver that have had under 9-inch hands. You look at guys who have had under 9-inch hands. Ty Felton was 6 foot. Tez Johnson was 5'9". Jalen Knoll was 5'9". So to see a guy that's 6'1", 212 pounds to have smaller than 9-inch hands is a little bit of a concern. But I don't think it's enough for me to say, hey, this guy can't play football. I'm not going to draft him. It's just a noteworthy thing to say, hey, that's one of those thresholds like we see with NFL offensive linemen, 33-inch arms. That's either a tackle or a guard. Under 9-inch hands at the receiver position just gets a little bit hairy.
It does. And I will say, listen, I've fallen for the hand size on the opposite end of the spectrum before. I think Sky Moore had like 10.5-inch hands.
I remember that.
I really liked Sky Moore as a prospect. Didn't shape out the way I thought it would, but I raised him up like, a full, not a full round, but a full, like from mid second or whatever it was to early second. Cause I was like, oh my God, he's never going to drop the ball, but Jack Besh never drops the ball either.
Yes.
So I think if he had, 6 drops this year and had sub 9-inch hands, I'd be really concerned, but he's an all hands catcher, doesn't body catch the ball too often. So I think, the hand size, it'll be a concern for me if I see fit for it to be a concern. But I think for now, I'm all aboard the Jack Besh train. And again, this isn't somebody that I'm like draft top 10. This is somebody that I'm like, draft 45 and you reap the benefits of having somebody that you can play on every snap, throw the ball up to, ask him to run a slant and watch corners struggle to tackle him. Because it's really funny, especially you turn on, I think it was the UCF tape where he caught like a little curl route or a little slant route and just nobody could tackle him. And it's hilarious because you got a 6'1", 225 guy who's just ragdolling corners and safeties left and right. And so I think Jack Besh, you see it with Puka at the NFL level. Obviously, he's not ragdolling anybody, but he's always going to fall forward. You can throw it short of the sticks to Puka because he's going to win after the catch. So I think Jack Besh is another guy with kind of the Puka potential, but it's more of a stylistic comp. They play similarly.
Yeah, and this is a guy who he does it from different positions, right? They start him out wide, they motion him in, they put him in the slot, they put him outside. They can use him in different ways. That's what you see the Rams doing with Puka Nacua, right? Always motioning him, always giving him leverage, always giving him advantageous positions, right? And it's smart because hey, he might not be the greatest athlete to just continually win off of press coverage. Now they can beat it, but hey, let's put him in a position. So with the right offensive coordinator, Jack Besh could be a freaking stud in the NFL. And the other thing I like that I love about Puka Nacua, these guys are not afraid to get dirty in the run game. They are great run blockers. Hey, if you put them close to the line of scrimmage, they're going to try to dig out a backer. They're going to be able to dig out a safety. Like, they're bigger, they're physical. They need to be able to account for the 8th man in the box, the 7th man in the box, and they'll do that consistently. So that's one thing I was really impressed with about Jack Besh when I was watching his tape from TCU is he's consistently active in the run game. Like, he doesn't take plays off. He's looking to get his team an advantage, and he's trying to get, those blocks to break off the running game. So I do like that about Jack Besh also.
Our next guy here is Gray Zabel, national champion at North Dakota State this season. Offensive lineman, came in, I think, as a tackle. I think he played tackle all season, measured under the 34-inch arm threshold, and it was pretty obvious going in that he was somebody that was going to transition to guard, and man, did he excel. He actually took snaps at guard and center, and in my opinion, this is the player who rose his stock the most of anybody. We talked about Elijah Arroyo. You could make the case for him. For me, it's going to be Gray Zabel. And I think I was doing a mock draft earlier today just for fun. And when you look at the back end of the first round, North Dakota State first round, but it's not a quarterback. When you look at the back end of the first round, you see the Texans, the Rams, the Ravens, the Chiefs, some of those teams that just need offensive linemen, whether it's depth, they have an older player whose contract is expiring, or they have a hole. One of their 5 spots, perhaps at center, one of the 2 guard spots, just isn't up to their standard. Gray Zabel, I think, is somebody that could be a day 1 pick, fill a need immediately, and absolutely knock it out of the park. This guy's anchor is insane. He was taking pass rush reps against some of the best interior D linemen in the entire draft and stonewalling them. I think this guy's the biggest riser for me, and I think Gray Zabel's a name. If you're coming out of the Senior Bowl knowing one name you didn't before, Gray Zabel's the guy to know, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is a guy that a lot of people are going to look over because he's an FCS guy, right? Hey, Cody Mock's been a great FCS guy to play in the NFL. He's been able to do it in the trenches. Cody Mock.
Cody Mock. Sorry, I was thinking Quinn Miners. There's another one though.
Quinn Myers is like Division III football.
Yeah, Wisconsin Whitewater. Don't overlook those guys.
No. I mean, and so it's there's success in the NFL of these guys, and like you said, it's this guy is stout. Like, Gray Zabel is stout, and I think Will Campbell would still be my interior offensive lineman 1. But Zabel is probably 2 or 3, man. He's dang close up there.
Him and Tyler Booker.
And I mean, you look at his snap count. So he played 961 snaps at left tackle this year. He's not going to be a left tackle in the NFL. But he has over 300 snaps at left guard, and he has over 1,000 snaps at right tackle. So he's played both tackle positions. He's played guard, and you saw him snap a little. Like, he's going to have the opportunity to play left guard to right guard, any of those spots right there, wherever a team needs him. That's what you saw with Cody Mock coming out of North Dakota State. He was a left tackle. Big old dude, came in as a tight end, like 250 pounds. They got him up to 300 and whatever pounds when he got drafted. Now he's been a starting left guard for 3 years in the NFL. So that's what you're going to see out of Gray Zabel. And what I love about these North Dakota State guys, and what I specifically love about Gray Zabel, is the brand of football they play is tough, physical, and these guys, like, they literally look like Vikings, bro. They are freaking massive human beings that just love football, and they have a desire to put anyone and everyone in the dirt. And so I love Gray Zabel.
I wish that when North Dakota State guys, specifically the offensive linemen, move to the NFL, they could keep that little wheat helmet stripe that they have.
Yes.
That just encapsulates it perfectly. It's like, I am going to play football, blue collar. I'm going to throw you around. You're not touching my quarterback. I'm going to do whatever I want to you. You're not going to touch the quarterback. And that's just the way it's going to be. These guys play FU football, and Gray Zabel, I think, is next in line. I talked about Quinn Miners earlier, Wisconsin Whitewater, Cody Mock, North Dakota State, Gray Zabel. He's next in line. And I don't think the NFL is going to miss on Gray Zabel. I think
I don't
some people sitting there on draft night are going to be like, whoa, North Dakota State 25 to the Texans. Yeah, that was a good pick. That's what that's called.
His second highest graded. He had a 90.2 grade against Townsend, but everyone's going to say, oh, he's in the FCS. His second highest graded game was against Colorado, game 1 of the season, 90.1 PFF grade.
There
So,
you go.
okay, yeah, FCS. You go down and look at some of these teams. South Dakota State's obviously really good. Murray State, Missouri State, South Dakota, Abilene Christian, Mercer. Hit the game one against, Colorado, who everyone had been hyping up forever. They almost go in and take them to like the last play of the game. And he had a 90.1 PFF grade against his best competition all year. So that's not a problem for me. The whole knock of, oh, he didn't play in the, Power 5, Power 4, whatever it is. No, his best game of the year came against Colorado, game one at the University of Colorado.
Don't scout the helmet, people.
Don't scout the
player.
helmet. I hate when people do that.
No, and our last guy that we shared was Shamar Stewart, who is an absolute baller. He was listed at 6'6", 290 coming in, and he came in at 275, showing that he is going to be an edge rusher, a pass rusher at the next level. And my goodness, is he a freak. All the tools that you could want. I think Shamar Stewart it's not a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when he goes in the first round. Some front office is going to be so much higher on him than the league consensus is. And if they're picking from 15 to 32, I think Shamar Stewart goes off the board. So, the production may not be there, but the ways that he knows how to get to the quarterback if he pieces it all together. So some plays you see he's got great get off, and then, the pass rush plan's not all there. And then he gets off slower, but he's got great pass rush plan, heavy hands. And then someplace he finishes really well. I think if he gets into the right defensive system, they're going to teach him how to put it all together on an every down basis. And this guy's going to be a winner at the next level. I think Shamar Stewart came in and began to prove that he is in the process of putting it all together.
And you talk about a freak. 90th percentile in height, 6'5" and an eighth. 92nd percentile in wingspan, 83 and a half, and 80th percentile in arm length, 34 and a fourth. This
That's
dude's a freak. Like there's not many offensive tackles that have 34 and a fourth inch wingspan. Or arm length. So what offensive tackle is going to be able to, strike him and not let him get into his body? He's going to be an absolute stud. He had 12 TFLs this year and 4.5 sacks in 37 games. That was over 3 seasons. So like I said, it's not elite production. It's not Mike Green 15 sacks, but I think this guy is also one of those dudes that's like, hey, you get him in the right system. I think when we did the mock draft, did we take him to the Packers? Do you remember?
Ooh, I don't remember, but if I were to say, who fits Shamar Stewart the best in terms of athletic profile, that's the team.
That's what I thought we talked about him going to the Packers, because it was like, hey, this is a guy that the Packers are going to love and fall in love with because of how he plays, get him in the right scheme, his measurables. But I don't think he makes it to the Packers there anymore. Yeah, I agree with you. I think some team's going to fall in love with him in the, early teens and be like, hey, we can do something with this guy. And a random NFL executive, this is on Bleacher Report, said meet this year's Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker went number 1 overall. Probably should have been Aiden Hutchinson, but still,
good football player, by the way. Trayvon Walker is very good at football. He just went a couple picks too high.
Yes, but you remember when he shot up in the draft was because his measurements and the combine stuff that he did. They're like, this dude's a freak athlete. And that's what Shamar Stewart has shown. That was all the stuff I read off, height, wingspan, arm length was since D-line prospects since 1999. So in the past 25 years, he's one of the best ones size-wise stuff. And you've seen him at a high level, elite twitch, good run defender in the SEC. Continuing to make plays.
All right, Jace, I'll let you get into your 3 guys, and then I have my 3 guys, and then we'll keep rolling into some of the fallers.
Okay, my first guy, I'm going to stick with the receivers. I love Jack Bech. I think a guy that I've been high on and a guy that I've really, really liked for a long time is Jaden Higgins. And I think Jaden Higgins is cracking the top 5 receivers for me. His height and stuff has been putting him in, hey, he's probably a true X receiver. I value that. I think that there's a lot of guys that are really good slot receivers this year. You hit it on the head when we did our mock draft. It's a lot of pick your flavor for this class. Yep. As a Patriots fan, I like the X receivers because we don't have one on there. But there's also, which we'll talk about, Xavier Restrepo, guys like that who are good in the slot. But I really liked what I saw out of Jaden Higgins. 6'3" 3/4", 217 pounds, had 9 and a half inch hands. What I really like about him, he had the biggest wingspan amongst receivers, 6'7" and 3/8 inch wingspan. So you talk about a guy, yeah, okay, he's almost 6 foot, but he also has a huge catch radius. Huge catch radius. Throw it up to him, let him box someone out, let him go up and make a catch. The other thing that I was super impressed with is seeing how good his footwork was and how he did not waste movements in and out of breaks on his routes against press coverage. For a guy that's 6'3", hey, you expect that out of a guy that's 5'10", 5'11". You don't expect that out of a guy that's Jaden Higgins' size. And so I thought that he did a ton for me, kind of checked off those boxes. Hey, he's a bigger receiver. Can he, is he a good route runner? Can he sink his hips? Can he get in and out of breaks? Yeah, he does it better than what a 6'3" guy should be able to do. And I really like him. And he's been super productive. He had over 1,100 yards this year. He had over 900 last year. He has over 25 total touchdowns in college football. Like, he's been a good, productive receiver for Iowa State in the Big 12 for the last couple seasons.
Did you have trouble judging his speed at first because of Jalen Knoll on the tape? Because
A little bit.
Jalen Knoll's moving so fast, and you're like, dang, Higgins is slow. And then you take your hand and you cover half the screen so that Jalen Knowles...
You don't look at him.
Yeah, you don't look at the just light ray flying across the field. But Jaden Higgins, because I will admit at first, one of my first notes on him was like, not great speed. And then I'm like, okay, his teammate's just really fast.
Yes.
Jaden Higgins is, like you mentioned, outside wide receiver, and I think he stays there. There's some guys that are outside wide receivers in this class that played outside a couple times, and I think they're better full-time slot guys. I think, and you can correct me if I'm missing anybody, but if you look at this class, it's like Tet McMillan, Matthew Golden, Jaden Higgins, and then Elike Omanor as like outside wide receivers. And I would say that Matthew Golden profiles more as a Z, which is still outside, but just not like, you're not going to throw the ball up to him. I mean, you can, and he'll get it, but not every time, just like these bigger body guys. I really like Jaden Higgins. I prefer his teammate Jalen Knoll just a hair. They're wide receiver 9 and 10 for me. Yeah. Like you mentioned, pick your flavor. We are ranking these receivers for a invisible fake team that does not exist. And there's going to be teams that are really high on Jaden Higgins because of what they need. Really high on Jalen Knoll, his teammate, who had a great week because of what they need. So yeah, I mean, I'm 100% on board. Wide receiver out of Iowa State, huge winner.
We'll get into our big board, so I don't want to spoil too much. But since you said it, I have Jaden Higgins right now as wide receiver 5.
Love it.
I like I said, it's it's close. It's close with Xavier Restrepo. Again, it's like, hey, pick your poison. And I have been, because of my other channel, kind of doing a big board specifically for Patriots, but I don't think it would, go too far once I get my big board in, just straight up talent. I think Jaden Higgins is going to be like wide receiver 6 or 7, right in that range, and possibly stay at wide receiver 5. His movement skills for his size are pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, I don't hate it at all. Do you want me to give you the first of my 3?
Yep. Give me the first year 3.
All right, so the first guy, I mean, we just talked about him a little bit. We'll spoil some of the big boards. My wide receiver 3 right now, Xavier Restrepo, Miami, absolute stud. I'm absolutely in love with this player. I made a post I mentioned earlier, my Senior Bowl stock watch, and it pained me to write at the end. I'm like, I think he cemented himself as a top 45 pick. And it hurts to write because I'm like, I'd take this guy in the top 25. He's an incredible slot receiver, always open, every single rep, amazing release, amazing hands, and he will block. We talked about Jack Besh, Xavier Restrepo, Jack Besh, and Elike Omanor, the receiver out of Stanford, who I think got a Senior Bowl invite, couldn't end up making it. Those are my three best blocking wide receivers in this class. Xavier Restrepo, absolute winner as a blocker, winner as a route runner, and he's not going to, burn you after the catch like, one of these elite wide receivers in the NFL. But I think Xavier Restrepo can work out of the slot and get 850 yards and 5 touchdowns as a rookie. I think if Xavier Restrepo goes to the right offense, we mocked him to the Commanders in our first mock draft, but if he gets to a quarterback that, lacks a receiver who can create on his own out of the slot, maybe take some of these manufactured releases out of motion where he doesn't have to face press, I think Restrepo is the guy in this class for that. And when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, he's better than Emeka Egbuka and Luther Bird and those other slot receivers. I just think Restrepo sometimes against press coverage may not be as good as those other two. And offensive coordinators are good enough these days to where, okay, this guy's going to come in motion. And guess what? if he comes in motion and you snap the ball and you run it, that means he's next to the line of scrimmage and he might knock over an outside linebacker. That's just the kind of player this guy is. Absolutely love what he did at the Senior Bowl. And he's a top 3 receiver for me in this class. And I think he's going to continue to ascend up big boards.
There's not very many guys that had a more productive college year than Xavier, or college career, sorry, than Xavier Restrepo. All-time leading receiver in Miami history. He had back-to-back 1,100-yard seasons. He had 11 touchdowns this year, 6 touchdowns last year. One thing that's impressive for me, he had 16.3 yards per reception this year, right? Oh, he's a slot guy. Yeah, he's really good in and out of his breaks. He's going to be a short to intermediate route guy. No, this guy is absolutely insane. Like, his movement skills is so well, and he can create after the ball, or with the ball in his hands after the catch. So he had the 3rd most slot yards. That's where he's going to be in the NFL. I really think he's this year's Ladd McConkey. Like, he just knows how to get open. He continues to get open. Not going to wow you. He'll probably test pretty well in the short shuttle, stuff like that, where he's getting in and out of his breaks. But he's going to be a slot receiver. He's going to be really freaking productive at it, and he's going to make a ton of catches for whatever quarterback he's playing for, and the offense is going to be able to go to him on 3rd downs, in the red zone, whenever they need a big-time play, they're going to be able to go to Xavier Restrepo. So I agree with you. You're talking about a straight slot guy, and, again, I know I keep referencing it, but as a Patriots fan, man, this guy is like, holy crap, he'd be the perfect Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type guy. But
I was just about to say that number 11 jersey over your shoulder, Julian right Edelman. Here. That's actually who came to my mind before Ladd McConkey when I was watching him, and I'm like, dang, where have I seen this before? I really didn't like watching this guy growing up, and I'm like, oh, it's Julian Edelman.
Yes. So, no, I agree with you 100%. I think Xavier Restrepo is going to be a really good NFL wide receiver for some teams. So, my next guy, let me pull him up right here, is a running back. I think that he did a ton to improve his draft stock. There were a lot of good running backs there, right? Ollie Gordon was a guy who had a ton of hype going into the season. He went to the Senior Bowl, and he was okay. Devin Neal out of Kansas was another guy. Marcus Yarns, it was another small school guy that kind of did. But SMU's Brashad Smith, they made a run to the playoff. They won the ACC. This is a guy, or sorry, they lost in the ACC championship. They lost to Clemson, but this is a guy who has home run speed, his vision, his change of speed, his, cutting ability. When he sees it, he hits it. This is a guy that I loved. He had a 90.1 PFF grade this year. That's like 3rd behind Ashton Genty, Amarion Hampton, and Cam Scatterbo. 3 dudes that were like, okay, those guys had ridiculous seasons this year. He's good out of the backfield. He had 337 receiving yards this year on 51 targets, 41 receptions. So he only had 10 incomplete passes thrown to him, but he also added 1,300 yards on the ground and 14 rushing touchdowns. Like, a big reason SMU made that step and was a 10-plus win team making the playoffs and the ACC championship was Brashad Smith. And he's kind of just gone under the radar because this is a deep running back class. Deep. Tons of dudes that are going to be available in the 1st, in the 2nd, in the 3rd, in the 4th. Like, you're going to have guys that are 6th or 7th round draft picks in this class that are going to be quality NFL running backs. I think Brashad Smith is one of those guys that kind of upped his stock this week and could have shot himself into, an early day 3 selection.
Yeah, and he's newer to the running back position. So when you're watching him, there's some plays where you're like, oh, no, that's not, wrong hole, or, tried to go north-south, tried to bounce it outside. But I think as he progresses, because he's not going to have to be the running back 1 right away. And I think as he progresses and, learns more from a running back coach at the NFL level, some of the veterans in a running back room, I think Brashad Smith's a guy that could take off. And I talked about this the other day on a different podcast where I was a guest on, but I talked about Jaleel McLaughlin for the Broncos, not a completely similar player, but somebody that I don't think understood completely the nuances of being an NFL running back right away. But the Denver Broncos did an amazing job of getting the ball in his hands from the get-go. When he was a rookie, he came out of Youngstown State, so he didn't have that much polish. And then as he's getting the ball in his hands, he's developing these natural instincts because he's a great athlete like Brashad Smith is. And that's kind of the career track that I would put him on if everything goes right for him. I think Brashad Smith is, he's going to be a weapon in the screen game. I love what he can do with the ball in his hands in the open field, and just really intriguing player. I see everybody on Twitter talking about how he's like the last sleeper of this deep running back class. And I'm like, well, not anymore. So I think we're on to Marcus Yarns for the last sleeper
Yes.
in this running back class. But yeah, Rashard Smith, definitely day 3 guy in my opinion, but I think he can be super productive.
One kind of dream spot, and I have actually heard Rhett Lashey talk offensive football in person at a convention and stuff. He was an outside zone type runner. I think of a dream fit for this guy. I know they have Christian McCaffrey. If this guy got in freaking Kyle Shanahan's hands as a 5th or 6th round guy to replace Christian McCaffrey, I know they have Garendo, which they took last year out of Louisville.
Great compliment to Garendo.
Yes, but if this guy could get in that system, obviously they have Jordan Mason stuff, but if he could get there as like a day 3 pick, I think that he would do great things in that type of offense, the Kyle Shanahan outside zone type of offense. So yeah, look for this guy. Hey, maybe because he's new to the position, he's going to kind of be, hey, a team has to have a vision for him. But if they have that vision for him, like a lot of players, right? You gotta call, and put your players in positions for their strengths. But if you get him in one of those outside zone systems, the Kyle Shanahan tree, it could be dangerous.
I completely agree. My next guy is another cornerback. We talked about Azare Thomas, who was an absolute winner. And this guy, another absolute winner on the smaller side compared to Azare Thomas. This guy's going to win in as a nickel, I think, in the NFL. Perhaps a move to safety, some downs for him. But it's Upton Stout out of Western Kentucky, who absolutely thrived in the one-on-ones this week. And really had a breakout season. I'm looking at some of his PFF grades right now, but he had an 84 defensive grade, 91 run defense grade, which really stands out. He's a 5th-year player, spent 2 years at North Texas, 3 years at Western Kentucky. So you're not getting a guy on the younger side, but I think you're getting a guy that's ready to play. Even if he comes into your system on day 3, I think he's somebody that if he falls outside the top 75 picks, somebody's getting a steal. And I would project right now that he falls past the 75th pick just because he's an older player on the smaller side. Yes. But I think if you get a defensive coordinator that's willing to roll with Upton Stout and believe in him as a nickel corner, I think somebody will look back on in 3 years and be like, how the heck did Upton Stout, God forbid, end up on the Chiefs? And just like, I just think he's one of those guys that's kind of easy to gloss over because he goes to Western Kentucky, but also because he's an older player and, everybody's like, doing what I just did right now. You pull up the PFF, you're like, oh, Alabama at the top, 41 defensive grade against Alabama next. But when you really turn on the tape with Upton Stout, he's a sticky corner in man coverage. I think he's good at zone coverage and, somebody that I think can continue to grow as he gets NFL level coaching, because it is a jump a little bit from the CUSA's level coaching to the NFL. It's a jump for everybody, but a little bit more from the group of 5. But Upton Stout was a huge winner. He showed he belonged. And I think that's really what it's about for these smaller school players at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, and he's most likely going to be a nickel corner in the NFL. He has played a little bit of outside corner for Western Kentucky this season. As I'm looking at PFF, he played 355 snaps in the slot, but when he was at North Texas, he played over 500 snaps outside as a true corner. So he's done them both. He's going to be a nickel corner in the NFL. But what I like about him too is I think he's a good blitzer. You don't get much blitzing from the straight up corner position in the NFL, but you get nickel pressures all the time. He's crafty. He's shifty. It's hard to find him, not just because he's short, but he's a really good blitzer. And I think that brings value to, like you said, the Chiefs or someone like that has a defensive mind who can be like, hey, let's disguise these coverages. Let's disguise this blitz. And at the time, Upton Stout can come off the edge or come through the B gap and make a sack or whatever. So I think, yeah, his size is going to be a little bit of a concern. 5'8", probably looking at a 4th or 5th round guy, but he's feisty. Looking at that run grade, like you mentioned, for a guy that's his size. Sign me up, man. Like I said, it's kind of like the receiver position. Hey, some guys just know how to get open. Hey, on defense, some guys just know how to tackle guys. It could be an ankle tackle. It could be through the knees. However it is, this guy knows how to get guys on the ground and make tackles. So I do like that. He did have almost an 8% missed tackle rate, but you kind of expect that with his size. With the 90.9 PFF run defense grade, he's showing up. He's willing. He's going to make plays. He's feisty. I like Upton Stout too as a later round, 4th, 5th round nickel corner type guy that has a role and, 11, 10 personnel type of packages.
If I'm to take a shot in the dark here, Colts, Lou Anarumo gets his Mike Hilton. There you go. Upton Stout, you're a Colt.
Yeah, that would be. There's a lot of things that you can do with a great nickel cornerback. So
Oh yeah.
finding a team that fits is good. So moving on to my last guy, for a winner for me, it was Armand Membu, right tackle out of Missouri. Okay, now a lot of people in this draft class at the tackle position are most likely going to be better interior offensive linemen. You think of Wyatt Milam, you think of Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks could probably be a tackle, but yeah, maybe he would project better as a guard. There's a lot of guys like this. Marcus Membo came in, not Marcus Membo. I was reading the wrong one. Armand Membu came in at 6'3" and 3/4. He had 33 and 1/8" arms. He weighed 332 pounds, and he had a 6'9" wingspan, one of the longer ones. Emory Jones had 6'10". Jonah Savanaia had 6'9", but he had massive arms, 33 and 5/8. But a bigger, longer guy who I liked, Armand Membu. He started the last 3 years at the University of Missouri, had a really good season last year, 90.4 PFF grade. He had a 87.6 run blocking grade and a 85.4 pass blocking grade. Good at both of those. Good athlete, twitched up, can dig guys out in the run. I like Membu. I think that why I like him so much and why I think he's climbing draft boards is you're just seeing a lot of these top tackles in the NFL or in college football measure and probably look more like guards. And Membu, Josh Connerly, and who we already we've mentioned before, I mentioned Josh Simmons. Those guys are climbing up draft boards because they have the length, they have the size to stay at tackle, and that's a valuable thing in the NFL. So he was a big one, his measurements, but two, seeing how he moved, seeing those things in the NFL or in the Senior Bowl made me want him more as, a true offensive tackle and not one of those Marcus Membo, Wyatt Milam type guys who you saw bump inside to guard and center. Gray Zabel, right? You saw him bump in. You're like, hey, I like Membu because he is a true offensive tackle.
And it hurts sometimes when you turn on Senior Bowl tape and a guy that like you thought was a tackle through and through, and then you're like, oh no, he didn't win out there. But that wasn't the case. And I think he's somebody that's got a really strong anchor. Again, we talked about that with Gray Zabel. He played right tackle for Missouri. Just really impressive all around. And when there's certain teams that are actually solid on the interior and they really need tackle. So maybe they don't go in the direction, like you mentioned, of a Will Campbell or a Kelvin Banks. Both have their share of concerns about whether or not they can survive on the outside. So I think I almost said Marcus too.
I know.
I think Membu really, really is somebody that's going to stick on the outside and be an NFL tackle.
Yes. And the one thing is he did get sick. So he didn't even get a practice much. He missed the first 2 days for sure. Yeah. But the measurement thing for me was my biggest concern. I've watching a film of Marcus Membo. I've seen him. I actually think I had him as like offensive. He was a top 5 offensive tackle for me going into Senior Bowl. And it was really like, hey, is his arms going to check out? Is he going to be able to play right tackle? And
what if I told you said Marcus Membo again?
Did I really?
Yeah.
Dude, that's going to be the thing.
Marcus Armand Membu.
That's Marcus Membo is now Armand Membu.
We'll flip it.
Dang it. Yes, you are totally right. Guys, for those of you that are like, holy crap, they've said 8 different names. We are talking about Armand Membu from Missouri. I'm so sorry for all the confusion.
He got sick, measured in. Yes. That's what I mean when we're like survived at tackle. We're like, phew, got there, met all the thresholds, got sick, went home. Yes, and then Marcus Mbo was a tackle at Purdue, and he's probably going to be a guard or center at the NFL level.
He played mostly guard and center.
And I think he could be the best center in this class if he's, if we're talking about him as, hey, he's a center. I think that's the guy. Unless Will Campbell says, hey, I'm playing center. Yeah, because then that's the best center in the class.
Well, we're going to leave. We're going to leave Marcus Membo and Armand Membu out of the next 8 months of conversations because we can't seem to get their names right. Just me personally. I'm not going to talk about.
Oh, no. Yeah.
I can't get them.
Purdue guy, Missouri guy.
No, yeah. Armand Membu, Missouri winner for me, just off of measurements alone.
And then my last guy is Darius Alexander, a much more simple name, the interior defensive lineman out of Toledo. And he won all week with his hands, quickness, and was somebody that I really didn't have on my radar at all. I was like, okay, cool, Toledo. And what do you know? Another player from Toledo goes down to Mobile and absolutely blows everybody away. Quinyon Mitchell was more of a name going into last year, but Darius Alexander, man, he was impressive. And then you turn on the PFF grades and you're like, oh, 90 defensive grade this season, 90 run defense grade this season. This guy was everywhere for Toledo. And I haven't had much of a chance to watch any of his tape outside of the Senior Bowl reps, but just on those reps alone, he was everywhere. And I think he earned himself somewhere, back end of the second round, early of the third round, you're going to see Darius Alexander's name come off the board in what is a really deep interior defensive line class. So it's really valuable for him to make a name for himself. And when his name comes off the board, that team got a good player. And, if I'm to look at early fits, we talked about a little earlier, Philly, Milton Williams potentially gone. I know they have Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Darius Alexander. Man, oh man, good player. I think he's going to continue to rise.
And he was voted the top defensive lineman by the opposing offensive lineman, right? So
that means a lot.
That does mean a lot, right? Like there was good defensive linemen there. Like you said, that tight end and running back have, to me, been like a deep class. And defensive line is getting in that conversation too. Edge rushers in that conversation too. But you're looking at guys that are like, hey, the D line, the interior defensive line, along with the edges, is a really deep class. Darius Alexander is another example of that. Like, hey, if you could get this guy in late day 2, maybe even early day 3, that's going to be a steal. This guy is going to be great. He had a career high in tackles, 40 last year, and then he had 7.5 TFLs. He also added 1 TFL and a couple pressures in the Senior Bowl game. But yeah, this is a guy, like you mentioned, Quinyon Mitchell took the spotlight last year. Looks like they might have another NFL star in Toledo this year. So maybe we start putting some respect on Toledo's name and looking more into their prospects, because these are 2 guys who are going to have, in my opinion, really good NFL careers. And he's going to be a force on the interior defensive line, both in the run and in the pass. And that's what gets you on the field as a rookie, especially on the defensive line, whether it's edge or interior. Hey, if you're just a pass rusher, you're probably just a third down guy. But if you can play in both scenarios, they're going to trust you a lot more. You're going to get a lot more 3 down looks, and you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm going to roll for 4 plays and then get a breather, because, we are big physical dudes. It is hard to play D-line for 8 straight plays, but he's going to carve out a role because he can do both at a high level.
And if there's a betting market on next year where you can say, hey, insert Toledo player here, Senior Bowl riser, just place the bet, because, 2 for 2, and that's how that works. And now the portion of the show that I'm sure everybody's been waiting for, the guys that are not losers of this event, kind of like I highlighted at the beginning, stocks go up, stocks go down, but certain guys, didn't perform or measure the way we really thought they were going to. And, those are the guys we're labeling as fallers for this event. And that doesn't mean that, they're done for, they can't be good, but it's just somebody that either had an opportunity to do something special for their draft stock, failed to do it, or somebody that kind of was, whoa, I didn't expect that kind of a week. So we have 4 guys here, 2 that we kind of both agreed on, 1 that we kind of, brought to the table ourselves. I'll get it started with one of those 2, and I think this is probably going to be the most popular one out of this event. That's quarterback Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
And I honestly think part of it is based on unfair expectations, because going into this event, I see all over Twitter, I'm like, Jalen Milroe's got a chance to become the QB3 in this draft class. I'm like, I don't know if anything he does at Mobile could make me think that.
Yeah.
And then he comes in with sub 9-inch hands, and, there's videos of him skipping passes, overthrows, underthrows, throws left, throws right. And it just wasn't a good week for Jalen Milroe. And what's tough is when those are also reflected on tape, where you're like, oh, that wasn't just a Senior Bowl thing. And so Jalen Milroe is a guy that I was much lower on than ever being QB3 in this draft class. And as you note, if you've noticed, we haven't talked about anybody being QB3, because I truly don't think anybody went in there and was like, I'm QB3 now. And, everybody's saying like, oh, Jackson Dart did that. And I'm like, no, it's just because he didn't have the week Jalen Milroe had. I think it's still a wide open discussion. But Jalen Milroe definitely stock down, hand size, performance wise. Hope he interviewed great, because I'm sure he's a great dude. But still is a very high upside prospect. But this is not somebody that I would touch on the first 2 days.
No, and it's, for me, the next 3 guys we're going to mention, I don't even want to say they performed as bad as Jalen Milroe. And like you said, it's no disrespect to Jalen Milroe. I just think the other guys are like, hey, they didn't do anything to improve their stock and their measurements came in small. Jalen Milroe consistently was throwing balls in the dirt at dudes' feet, bouncing them up there. Like you mentioned, he had small hand size, and he was inconsistent this year at Alabama. Yeah, he had a couple really good games, and then he had a couple that were just like, holy crap, this guy is struggling. And so, yeah, it's a concern for me. I at this point, he might fall out of the top 5 quarterbacks. It is a really weak class. So
he's out of my top 5.
yeah, it's really weak. And I think the best attribute of him is he can run the ball. He's really athletic. He can make plays with his feet. But man, if I was Seaman or I was playing against Jalen Milroe, I'd freaking let him throw the ball. I'd put 8 dudes in the box and say, hey, if you can throw it into one-on-one coverage consistently, then that's how you're going to beat us. I'm not going to let him run around. And, at least Lamar Jackson, at least Josh Allen, yeah, they can run, but they can also hurt you with their arm. And I just don't see how Jalen Milroe can do that. And that's why, yeah, he's a loser for me. And gosh, I don't want to say he's going to go undrafted, but he's probably a late day 3 pick for me.
And I'm really glad you separated these 4 guys, because I do think Milroe's kind of in a spot on his own amongst these 4, because the other 3 guys we're about to get into, I still have a lot of faith in them as prospects. They're just either there's going to be different schemes that they're going to have to fit into. Maybe they only work for 10 NFL teams. And so that's why the stock's down. And we're highlighting that to reflect that that's likely the case. I think 32 teams moved Jalen Milroe down on their board this week, unlike what happened for these other 3 guys. So I'm happy to separate him from the rest. And I think he separated himself negatively from the rest of the quarterback class.
For sure. Our next loser, which I think is mostly off of measurements alone, in my opinion, and he did struggle a little. Now, he did get moved into center and interior offensive lineman, which he has played mostly left tackle. It's Wyatt Milam out of West Virginia. He came in with, what was it officially? I'm trying to pull it up. 32
and a half inch arms.
32 and a half inch arms. Like,
that doesn't even meet the guard threshold for 33 inches.
Yeah, it's a little concerning. And he is 6'6" and 3/8. That's what he measured at height wise. Like,
that makes it even more concerning.
Yeah, he's tall. He has a good frame, but he does not have the arm length. And so he's gonna be a center guard in the NFL. For me, I think that anything above 33 inches that's gonna be a very successful, not a very successful, but that's the success in the NFL. And 32 and 5/8 is pushing it. And that's where it's like, hey, he's going to be, the interior offensive lineman. Doesn't mean he won't be very good. I think this guy was really productive in college. He's really powerful, really good in the run game. So he's going to have a role, but he's definitely not as high on my board anymore because I don't think he's a true tackle. He's falling into the interior. And I think that there's guys I like better, like Gray Zabel. I think I like Tyler Booker better. There's guys in the interior offensive line that I like more than Wyatt Milam, as now he's officially getting bumped in.
Yeah, and I think the interior offensive lineman class of true guys that are actually guards and centers, we're taking out the guys that are moving in from tackle. I think Wyatt Milam slots in a little lower than some of the, Gray Zabel, Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, should he move inside. Anybody that's moving inside, I think Milam slots in the lowest of those kind of higher profile guys moving inside. And it's because I think his frame's got awkward guard proportions, where if you're like, okay, this guy's got short arms, but he's 6'4", cool, guard. And listen, that's not to say Daniel Falele didn't play guard well this season. That dude's huge. He's 6'8", over 6'8". So like, it works. There's bigger guards in the NFL. But and Wyatt Milam had elite PFF grades plastered all over his grade chart this season. So Wyatt Milam has been a good player, but I'm just concerned about the shorter arms and the taller height moving into guard for the first time, and how that's going to translate. And that's not to say that he can't be a 2nd or 3rd round pick, but that's to, let you guys know that maybe when Mel's top 10 is rolling on day 3 and Wyatt Milam is number 1 there for like 50 picks.
Yeah.
That's kind of the reason why. And, and like you mentioned, it wasn't all pretty in practice either. So name to watch as a potential faller. I don't think he probably got out from Mobile what he wanted to going into the event, but he's not somebody, again, like we talked about with Jalen Milroe, that, just blew up his draft stock.
Yeah, I think I originally had him as probably an early 2nd round pick, and now I'm moving him back to 3rd, probably 4th round pick right now.
Yeah.
So, bump him down around maybe 2. not the end of the world, but yeah, he had high expectations. Watching his film and stuff, he's a good offensive lineman. But
Yeah.
he's probably not a early second round pick like he once was before the Senior Bowl.
So similar kind of breath, Wyatt Milam to one of my guys who I was looking for more out of the Senior Bowl, and that's Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end out of Bowling Green. I was looking to see, the guy that ran all over everybody, had over 1,300 yards. I think he set the receptions record all time for tight ends in a single season at Bowling Green. And he had amazing games at Texas A&M, at Penn State. So this wasn't some, Mac merchant here. This guy's the real deal as a receiver. And I kind of alluded to it earlier when we went over some of the fallers, but Harold Fannin Jr., probably doesn't work for 20 NFL teams, because he profiles more as of a slot / H-back kind of guy. I think he was under 6'4", around 248. I think that's what he measured in or weighed in at. So Fannin's a very scheme specific kind of think Jonnu Smith, Isaiah Likely, like I talked about. And, those guys wouldn't necessarily work everywhere in the NFL. So I think Harold Fannin's still a really good football player. Also some concerns about, how great of an athlete he is, how great of a blocker he can be. Somebody that might be very scheme specific.
Yeah.
And I hope he falls into the lap of somebody that can win with Harold Fannin, because I really don't think you can draft him and just be like, yep, this guy's going to play traditional tight end for us. I don't think that's how it's going to work. So I think Harold Fannin, if he ends up with somebody that's really committed to having a usage plan for Harold Fannin, this is how we're going to get him on the field and this is how we're going to win, I think that's where he'll go. So he may slide, could be for his benefit though.
Yeah, he was right at 6'3", 6'3" and an eighth. So he's not like, 6'3" and a half. He's not 6'3" and 3/4, a little bit on the smaller side for tight end. So like you mentioned, he's probably only carving out a role in 11 personnel. You're not going to put him in at 12 personnel. You obviously aren't going to put him in with his hand in the ground very often. You're going to have to find an offensive coordinator or someone that's scheme specific with him. But I think you hit it on the head. It's not that he was bad. It's just, I wanted to see him, replicate what was his stats? He had 1,500 receiving yards this year, set a record in college football. Like, that's what I wanted to see, that elite explosion and stuff like that. And it just wasn't there. Now, he had a good game. He led the team in catches and targets. It was only 4 for 24. It's not like he was outstanding. He did have a drive where he had multiple catches and it set up the Jack Besh touchdown. So he did good things. It's just, when you compare him to what Elijah Arroyo did, he probably did more than what Harold Fannin did. And so it's like, hey, the clear winner is Elijah Arroyo. It's just for what the expectations Harold Fannin had, he just didn't boom. I don't think he submitted himself as a first round pick. I don't think he submitted himself, as a top 3 tight end, but that doesn't mean he's not a really good player and he doesn't do really good things. It's just, he came in, he had an average week. You still know he's a good football player. He's going to be worth a draft pick, in the second or third round. But like you said, it's a scheme specific guy that is going to have to carve out a role in 11 personnel, split out wide, find a offensive coordinator that can make his strengths come to life.
I'd just rather have Jack Besh in that role. And I think there's going to be a lot of teams that think that way, where it's like, hey, we need a slot receiver, somebody that can win in the slot. I'd just rather have the receiver. So if you're searching for a Travis Kelce, a tight end that you can put out there and act as a slot receiver, some teams will think Harold Fannin can be that. Other teams won't. That's just what it's going to come down to.
For sure. So last loser, this one was kind of mine. And it's Sebastian Castro. And it's another one. It's like, gosh, was he bad? No, he wasn't bad. He had some struggles in coverage, right? He's a bigger safety. He came in officially at 200. Geez, I scroll off of these all the time, so I lose them. He came in officially at 202 pounds, 5'11". He's a bigger safety, right? You're not expecting him to be able to keep up with Xavier Restrepo, Jalen Knoll. He had a little bit of tougher times, but this is another guy, in my opinion, that is scheme specific, right? He's a bigger guy. I look at him similar to one of those hybrid type guys, Marte Mapu coming out of Sac State. One of those guys. He's not as dynamic as Kyle Hamilton, even though Kyle Hamilton, he can guard tight ends. He can do those things. I don't think Sebastian Castro is quite like that. So again, it's scheme specific. He was really good in 2023. He was inconsistent this year in 2024. He allowed a 107.0 passer rating when they were targeting him. It's just, that's really high. Like I said, not a bad football player. It's just scheme specific. Someone's going to take him and someone's going to be able to do some things unique with him, but it's just you would have liked to have seen him a little bit more be able to stick with receivers so you could feel comfortable playing him in the passing game, and you just didn't quite see that out of Sebastian Castro.
And I think he's a day 3 guy, but somebody with upside on day 3 if he's in the right spot.
He's going to be a special teams warrior, I can tell you that. He'll be on a ton of special teams and do a ton of really good things.
When you draft a player from Iowa, count on that.
Yes.
No matter who it is, offensive side, defensive side, just they're gonna be just dogs for you. And that's what Castro will be. And how do you apply that to the defensive side of the ball? That's the challenge that's going to come with drafting him on day 3. But kind of just to wrap up these 4 losers, fallers, however you want to put it, it's kind of Milam, Castro, Fannin in their own category. Didn't exactly get out what we wanted to see from them at the Senior Bowl. And then Milroe didn't have super high expectations coming in, and those not so high expectations were not met. So those were our 4 of our fallers. And then just to recap, these winners for us was Elijah Arroyo, Miami's tight end, Zaire Thomas, Florida State's quarterback, Jack Besh, TCU receiver, Gray Zabel, interior line from North Dakota State, Shamar Stewart, the A&M edge rusher, Jaden Higgins, receiver, Iowa State, Armand Membu,
Marcus Membo,
offensive tackle from Missouri. And then who was your other one?
Rashad Smith from SMU.
Rashad Smith, running back SMU. And then my 3 were Xavier Restrepo, the Miami receiver, Upton Stout, the Western Kentucky nickel corner, and then Darius Alexander, the Toledo interior defensive lineman. Thank you guys so much for listening to episode 2 of the Draft Geeks podcast. Feel free to comment your Senior Bowl winners, your Senior Bowl losers. Who are you most impressed with? Who caught your eye? Who do you want to see more from? But for Max Showstack, Jace Campbell, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.